I'm Margaret Malone, and this is my first grade measurement lesson, Measure Up. For this lesson, you don't really need that much, but I created this poster and printed out these little pictures of classroom objects because I really think that this is a really fun and interactive way to get the kids engaged in the lesson, and I love little smiley face objects, who doesn't? But you really need a thing you can use as a non-standard length unit. So I have a ribbon. You can use a string, a rope, really anything. I have ribbon. And also you're going to need toothpicks or paper clips, or I saw someone use bobby pins and I really like that, but I'm always losing my bobby pins. This will take probably in a classroom around 30 to 45 minutes. You can really stagger it to take like 15 minutes, or you can add more shapes, which I have, and make it take longer, or you can stagger it and break it up and do just like the first part of the lesson and then go do an activity and then come do the second part of the lesson. And it can take like as long as you really need it to, but their attention span is probably best to take at max like 20 minutes for this. And it can be used during whole group instruction or small group instruction. This poster lends itself best to whole group instruction, and I like to do it with like everyone's at the carpet and sitting down and in their spot or just in a circle, and everyone can see it. Hopefully everyone can see it. And it's pretty interactive, so it's fun. The standards that this lesson is based on is first grade's Measurement and Data Standards 1 and 2, and some mathematical practices that I really want to emphasize in this lesson is especially mathematical practice 3, which is construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others, because when you're doing estimation and measurement, it's really good to introduce like, oh hey, I think you're wrong, or hey, check each other and see if you guys are doing quality estimation and things like that, which is a really good way to introduce those mathematical practices into a first grade lesson. Some key math content for this lesson includes vocabulary terms such as longer than, shorter than, compare, a little more, a little less, length, width, and then things such as gap and overlapping. So they really have to understand what you're saying when you say things like this, and when you're having mathematical conversations, it'll be really good if they use things like that, because then they'll really understand the foundations of measurement. And then a really important idea introduced in this lesson is transitivity. And so transitivity is the first standard of measurement and data, and that is comparing two objects with a third object, which we're going to use as a ribbon, and analyzing their size and putting them in order from biggest to smallest using this third object. And this is a really important idea because this idea isn't ingrained into them already. It's not something you grow up naturally knowing, and so that's why it's very important that they learn it in first grade, because the next standard will build on that, and then the next year's standard will build on that, and then by the time they're using a ruler, they will be having trouble, and it is traced back to not having a very strong foundation in this standard. So for this lesson, students should be able to compare three objects by using a third object, and then they'll be able to use toothpicks to measure objects. And the only way these really will be mastered by students is by them doing it. And so this board is pretty interactive. So throughout the lesson, I plan on having students help out and students come up and interact with it. And it can even be modified to like level up with them as their mastery grows and measurement. So these things can all be removed pretty easily. In fact, I actually remodeled this board for my first lesson. So it's pretty easy to change, and it's pretty interesting for them to see it change and see them grow with it. So to start out this lesson, we're going to introduce the idea of transitivity, and so we'll be using this ribbon to analyze these two objects, the clock and the highlighter. And so these are pretty similar in size. And so we're going to try to use the same, like we're going with width today. And we're going to try to measure everything to the same just so they don't get confused, because technically this is their first introduction to measurement. And so we're going to be using this ribbon to figure out which one is shorter and longer and justify why. Okay, that's the most important part, is that this ribbon is used to justify why. So we're going to hold up the ribbon to the clock. So the ribbon is just little bit shorter than the clock. And so when you're doing this, you can be like, I know in my practicum class, there's a boss of the day. So like the first one, you could be like, have a student come up and say, please hold this up, and like just things like that to get them engaged. And they love to help out and do things like that. And so this ribbon is a little bit shorter than the clock. And if we use this measurement up to the highlighter, we can see that it's longer than the highlighter. So by using this length, we can conclude that the clock is bigger than the highlighter because this ribbon is longer than the highlighter and shorter than the clock. So then we'll move these on this line of big to small, and then we'll introduce a third object. And so the third object we have is this pair of scissors. So let me grab a piece of tape, and we will see if the scissors are bigger than the clock, or bigger than the highlighter, or smaller. So we'll take up the ribbon and hold it up to the scissors, and we'll see that the scissors are much, much bigger than the ribbon. So it must be bigger than the clock. And so for a third object, we have something. Now these objects are obviously bigger and smaller than each other, and we can see, but for their very first time, it'll be good, especially because you can ask them things such as, do you think this will be bigger or smaller, and why? And then we'll find out if their conjectures were right. And I like it. It's a really cool way to be like, talk to your shoulder partner. Do you think this glue is, oops, we lost the glue. Do we think this glue is bigger or smaller? And tell them why. And then that's a really good way to get them talking and thinking. And then you can hold this up and say, were you right? Were you wrong? And obviously the glue is the smallest, so we'll go here. And so I've done this very quickly for the purpose of this lesson, but this is very, very simple way to introduce transitivity, which is kind of a heavy topic and very important. So it's very fun, and you can add more shapes, like, and keep doing this with this, more shapes. And but now we're going to move on to the toothpick section, which again is just a model for them to, oops, we lost the clock. It's just a model for them to really start their process in measurement. So you're going to really try to model for them laying out the toothpicks for the length of this object. And then like you can get the whole class to count with you once you lay them out, and be like 1, 2. So this is like 2.5, and then you'll write this quantity here to show them that you're quantifying the measurement of this object using these. So during the lesson, I'd tape these up here and lay them out so they can see, and then write the number and round either to a whole or to a half, to just show like this is probably 2.5 toothpicks long, and this is 1.5 toothpicks long, and etc. And then really this is just like a model for them to go into it on their own, because that's the way they're going to master it. But you have to introduce how to do it without putting any gaps, without overlapping them, and how to estimate accurately so they can go and be successful by themselves. And so speaking of those activities, that's how I plan to assess this lesson, is to have an activity where they go around the classroom and measure various things in the classroom using the non-standard unit of measurement that we have decided, and also an activity that they write out their name and then they measure their name. And that's pretty much it for this lesson. Thank you for bearing with me through all my, but thank you.